Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. In this tutorial, we are going to be taking an inside look at the all-new Waves StudioRack. There's some very exciting new functionality here that allows you to load third-party plugins. Yes, that's right. Any third-party plugin, not a Waves plugin. You can load it directly into StudioRack. Yes, you heard me right. Any plugin that has a VST3 version, most of them will load without a hiccup. And then you also get all the functionality that you've come to know and love from the StudioRack Plugin Chainer, like internal side chaining. You can do parallel splits. You can set macros for all of these third-party plugins. But today, we're gonna build a vocal chain from scratch.
No more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most side, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good.
We are going to utilize some third-party plugins that I find are the absolute best options to recreate this vocal chain that's used by artists like Big Sean, Drake, Dr. Dre, Future, so many others. It's a hardware chain that's used in the studio, but I've got some plugins here that are going to get you very close and will replicate a lot of the processing that's going on with those hardware chains. So let's go ahead and dive in here and talk about how to first get your third-party plugins going in StudioRack. If you click on the menu up here and go to VST3, you can select scan plugins. So if I do that, I've already scanned mine, but it will go through and scan all of your VST3 plugins, and then we'll add them so that you can see them in this VST3 menu. Now, if for some reason you don't see those, you will likely want to clear this cache and rescan, and you can also direct it to wherever the folder is. So if for some reason your VST3 plugins are stored in a different location, just select custom folder, and then you'll be able to navigate to wherever you keep those on your computer, scan them, and then they're all going to start showing up here in the VST3 menu. All right, so let's get started building our Holy Grail rap vocal chain here in Waves StudioRack. First piece of gear that we're gonna need here is a 1073 style preamp and EQ. So there's a lot of plugins out here that replicate the 1073 or emulate the sound and the style. But if I'm gonna go with any, just like the best one out there, I personally like the Shep 73. This is a Waves plugin. I also like the Arturia, the pre-1973. That one is good as well. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this verse just dry, and then I'm gonna start dialing in some of these preamp settings as well as the EQ, and then we'll dive into our opto compressor, some of the other famous pieces of this Holy Grail rap vocal chain.
Never made for 9 to 5. We were built to do this on a higher level. God vibes, day one in the room. I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most side, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Now we're living like we should. We're never perfect, but with the Lord's purpose, it's worth it.
So that gives you an idea here. Don't worry about the clipping. All you folks out here who worry about red dots on your plugins, I just wanted to make sure that you could hear that. We're gonna turn that down. We're also going to go ahead and just put a limiter here on the end of this, just so that we're keeping things in check. Those of you who are more sensitive about your gain staging, I know that is a sensitive subject. Now let's go ahead and I'm gonna dial in the preamp section. Again, I really like what this does, and it gives you a bit of the grit and some of the forwardness of that 1073 style pre.
Better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most side, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good.
Listen closely, it's adding a little bit of that saturation, again, a little bit of that grit and character that we would expect from a 1073 pre, and I just like what it does. It's not too much or too overly aggressive in that sense. Now, if you do want to get heavy-handed with it, we can always turn this drive control on, but right now, just want to get a little bit of that pre-flavor. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the highs. I'm going to add some 12K, great vocal boost here in the 1073.
No plan B, they don't understand G. Keep your eyes in line, it's Christ all the time. Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes. Never made for 9 to 5. We were built to do this on a higher level. God vibes, day one in the room. I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most side, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Now we're living like we should.
All right, so we got a little bit of the boost in the highs, and then I took out a bit of 1.6. Another notch in the 1073 that's very useful for vocals is the mids. That 1.6 and 3.2, especially for me, I like to take that out of my vocals more often than not, rather than actually boosting anything in that area. Most mics, I'm getting too much of that information, so removing a little bit of that is very helpful. Now, also, I'm going to go to this 220 notch. I spoke about this in the previous video about optimizing the frequency response of your mic, no matter what mic you have, whether it's a Neumann U87 or a Manley Reference or a Rode NT1. You can start to kind of optimize things based on the frequency response curve. Again, I'll put a link if you want to get more in depth with that. But this mic has a particular buildup in 220. So to cut through on narration and VO, that's what this mic is designed to do, really. So I'm going to take a little bit of that out as well.
No plan B, they don't understand G. Keep your eyes in line, it's Christ all the time. Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were built to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Now we're living like we should. We're never perfect, but with the Lord's purpose, it's worth it. You got me feeling.
All right, so the second element we need to add here to our Holy Grail rap vocal chain is going to be generally an opto compressor. Now, if you're not familiar with opto compression, this is a compressor like the one you would find in a 737, or the compression that you're going to find in a CL1B, which we're going to cover here in just a minute. But there's also a variation of this where you actually use two compressors. So you would use something like a VCA compressor, like an 1176, and then feed that into something like the CL1B, which that's what we're going to do today. On the 1176 side, I'm going to use the CLA 76. Now, I know we've used just Waves plugins up to this point. Don't worry, we're going to get to the third-party ones here in just a minute. But these are just my favorite in terms of a 1073 and an 1176. So when we load up this preset, Start Me Up, it does just that. This is a really great starting point, and I usually will just leave it at 4:1, turn the analog off, and then we're just going to dial in a couple of dB of compression. You're going to notice the signal is not necessarily level-wise where we want it, but just trust me, these attack and release settings are generally okay for this. We're just going to dial it in so that we're getting 2 or 3 dB of gain reduction.
Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were built to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the womb, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people.
Just a tiny bit of glue there. Going to bring the lead as well as those dubs that we're running to this same aux. Just kind of glue everything together. All right, so now we're going to feed this into an opto compressor, which is usually the TubeTech CL1B. I know you all have seen this blue box in a lot of people's studios. Famous artists are using this. To my knowledge, the officially licensed one that I'm aware of anyway is the Softube one, and I really like the Mark II. It just has a nice effect to me. If there are other alternatives of this that you all know of, I would be curious. This is the only CL1B plugin emulation that I've tried, and I do like it. But again, if you have any recommendations there, leave those for us in the comments below. But let's go ahead and dial something in here. Again, I'm not going for heavy gain reduction. I just want a little bit of control, and then I'm going to add a little bit of volume just as a makeup gain to kind of bring us back to the level that we need to be at.
Christ all the time. Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were built to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Now we're living like we should. We're never perfect, but with the Lord's purpose, it's worth it. You got me. Sorry Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good.
All right, so we get a nice gentle sort of glue there. You saw that I did adjust the parallel compression just so that we're not getting too much of that. And I also have a relatively fast attack and release. Again, this is all to taste. So here with this particular vocal and this performance, I'm setting it that way. But most of you out there would probably go with a little bit slower attack. And that's okay. Also, the sidechain, the low cut, if you set these to sidechain out some of those lows, it will just enable the compressor to react a little bit more smoothly. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a de-esser. And in this case, I'm going to add the FabFilter Pro DS. Aside from the Waves de-essers, which are, sibilants, Waves DS, and then also the Manny Marroquin Triple D, Pro DS is a great de-esser, and I use this for certain things. It's very versatile, so we're going to dial this in. This is another piece of the Holy Grail rap vocal chain that is not talked about, but I can guarantee you that this 1073 opto compressor combo is then being run through a de-esser in the box or in hardware form at some point.
It's Christ all the time. Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Get live now, I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the womb, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide.
After you've dialed in the de-esser, depending on how intense you set that, you can then go back to your EQ here with the 1073, and you can usually boost a little bit more aggressively when you're following it with the de-esser.
Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing.
Just for fun, let's go ahead and set up a parallel split. And we're going to run this to a reverb. So we'll activate the split here. This is going to be our dry signal, and this is going to be where we're going to place a reverb. And guess what? We can use one of my favorite third-party plugins, a reverb plugin, actually, and it is from Valhalla DSP. It's the Valhalla Vintage Verb. So the beauty of StudioRack is right here in the plugin. I didn't have to set up a send. I don't have to do anything on the mixer. We have the dry signal, and then we have the split for the reverb, and we have a mix control here, which is like your dry wet for your reverb. You also have side chaining options, which I'm going to show you how to do that here, and you can even control the width. So if you wanted to mono out the reverb, or if you wanted to even go wider than 100%, it gives you ability to do that. So let's just slowly bring in some reverb.
Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing, started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide.
We can now sidechain that reverb with the internal StudioRack signal. So if I go and I select a Waves compressor like maybe R comp, you see that SC notated there. So if I click this and then we go up to our sidechain menu, if I click that SC there, we can either select the StudioRack input, or we can do the parallel split input, which in this case I'm going to do since we already have some of that processing there. So we'll select that, and you'll see that our reverb will now duck based on the signal. So we can avoid having something really washy, and then we can adjust the attack and release time accordingly as well.
Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide.
We can also create macros for any of the plugins in the chain, and then you can combine them to control multiple parameters. Let's say we wanted to control the mix or the parallel compression of both of these compressors. So I'm going to select mix on the CLA 76, and then I'm going to right click again, and then I'm going to go select parallel compression on the tube tech. So now if I pin that, you'll notice on the macro, I'm controlling the parallel compression there on the tube tech, and then I'm also controlling the mix control on the 76, so we can really dial in the amount of compression with both of those at the same time. So let's go ahead and take a listen to our verse with and without all the processing.
Sorry if I came off soft, I get live now. I just made this dodging suicide while looking in our tired eyes, never made for 9 to 5. We were about to do this on a higher level, God vibes. Day one in the room, I'm sending prayers up. Spirit been developing a better reason for my breathing. No more people pleasing. Started doing it for the most high, knowing that my ego couldn't provide what I really need. It's Christ's energy, a little peace of mind. Forgive my enemies, it's all good. Now we're living like we should. We're never perfect, but with the Lord's purpose, it's worth it. You got me feeling.
All right, y'all. So with that, we have rebuilt the Holy Grail rap vocal chain here in the new version of Waves StudioRack. You can now utilize this to load your favorite third-party plugins and utilize all the powerful workflow enhancements that StudioRack provides you. This is by far one of my favorite tools, a plugin that has changed my entire workflow and the way that I approach mixing and production and mastering. So I'm excited for those of you all who may have been on the fence because you weren't able to use some of your favorite plugins. Now you can take advantage of this same workflow. If you have any questions about what we did here with the latest version of Waves StudioRack, feel free to leave a comment below. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. Hit that notification bell for more. We'll talk to you soon.